Hello and welcome back to the reading of the Holy Bible. Today we will be doing chapters 13, 14, 15, as well as 16. Jesus speaks from a boat. On that day, Jesus left the house and was sitting by the water's edge. And as great crowds gathered about him, he got into a boat and sat down, and all the crowd stood on the shore. Parable of the sower. And he spoke to them many things in parables, saying, Behold, the sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the birds came and ate them up. And other seeds fell upon rocky ground, where they had not much earth, and they sprang up at once, because they had no depth of earth. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. And other seeds fell upon good ground, and yielded fruit, some 100-fold, some 60-fold, and some 30-fold. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. The disciples asked why he speaks in parables. And the disciples came up and said to him, Why dost thou speak to them in parables? And he answered and said, To you it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For to him who has shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him who does not have, even that which he has shall be taken away. That is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, neither do they understand in them is being fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, who says, Hearing you will hear, but not understand, and seeing you will see, but not perceive. Chapter 13, verse 12. One grace prepares for another. One who fails to correspond with grace will lose what he has. For the heart of this people have been hardened, and with their ears they have been hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their mind, and be converted, and I heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For amen, I say to you, many prophets and just men have longed to see what you see, and they have not seen it, and to hear what you hear, and they have not heard it. Parable of the sower explained. Hear, therefore, the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom, but does not understand it, the wicked one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is he who has sown by the wayside. Who was sown by the wayside. The one sown on rocky ground, that is he who hears the word, and receives them with joy, yet he has no root in himself, but continues only for a time, and when trouble and persecution come because of the word, he at once falls away. And the one sown among the thorns, that is he who listens to the word, but the care of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches chokes the word, and it is made fruitless. And the one sown upon good ground, that is he who hears the word and understands it, he bears fruit, and yields in one case 100-fold, in another 60-fold, and in another 30-fold. Parable of the weeds. Another parable he set before them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men were asleep, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and went away. And when the blade sprang up and brought forth fruit, then the weeds appeared as well. And the servants of the householder came and said to him, Sir, didst thou not sow good seed in thy fields? How then does it have weeds? He said to them, An enemy has done this. And the servants said to him, Wilt thou have us go and gather them up? No, he said, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time I will say to the reapers, Gather up the weeds first, and bind them in bundles to burn, but gather the wheat into my barn. Parable of the mustard seed. Another parable he set before them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field. This indeed is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it grows up, it is larger than any herb and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and dwell in its branches. Parable of the leaven. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and buried in 3 measures of flour, until all of it was leavened. All these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables, and without parables he did not speak to them, that what was spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the foundation of the world. Parable of the weeds explained. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. So answering them, he said, He who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, the good seed, the sons of the kingdom, the weeds, the sons of the wicked one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. But the harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. Therefore, just as the weeds are gathered up and burnt with fire, so will it be at the end of the world. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all scandals and those who work iniquity, and cast them into the furnace of fire, where there will be the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. Then the just will shine forth like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Parable of the treasure. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. He who finds it hides it, and in his joy goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Parable of the pearl of great price. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. When he finds a single pearl of great price, he goes and sells all that he has and buys it. Parable of the net. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net cast in the sea that gathered in fish of every kind. When it was filled, they hauled it out, and sitting down on the beach, they gathered the good fish into vessels, but threw away the bad. So it will be at the end of the world. The angels will go out and separate the wicked from among the just, and will cast them into the furnace of fire, where there will be the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. Conclusion of the parables. Have you understood all these things? They said to him. Have you understood all these things? They said to him, Yes. And he said to them, So then, every scribe instructed in the kingdom of heaven is like a householder who brings forth from his storeroom things new and old. Jesus at Nazareth. And it came to pass, when Jesus had finished these parables, that he set out from that place. When he had come to his own country, he began to teach them in their synagogues, so that they were astonished, and said, How did this man come by this wisdom and these miracles? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren James, and Joseph, and Simon, and Jude, and his sisters? Are they all not with us? Then where did he get all this? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, A prophet is not without honor except in his own country and his own house. And many of their unbelief did not work many. And because of their unbelief, he did not work many miracles there. The lowliness of Jesus and of his disciples and of his relatives proved to be a stumbling block for the people of Nazareth. He was much different from the Messiah they expected. I'd also like to make another note that this version of the Bible, but other versions too, make a note of. When it says brothers and sisters, it does not mean actual, like, sons and daughters for Mary and Joseph. What that is more referring to can be cousins, because back then, brothers and sisters did not always mean your actual physical brother and or sister. Chapter 14. Herod hears that Christ is John the Baptist. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servants, This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are working through him. Herod murdered John, for Herod had taken John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother's wife. For John had said to him, It is not lawful for thee to have her. And he would have liked to put him to death, but he feared the people, because they regarded him as a prophet. But on Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced before them, and pleased Herod, whereupon he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask of him. Then she, at her mother's prompting, said, Give me here on a dish the head of John the Baptist. And grieved as he was, the king, because of his oath, and his guest, commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison, and his head was brought on a dish and given to the girl who carried it to her mother. His disciples came, took away his body, and buried it, and they went and told Jesus. Hunger of the crowd. When Jesus heard this, he withdrew by boat to a desert place apart. But the crowds heard of it and followed him on foot from the towns. When he landed, he saw a large crowd, and out of compassion for them, he cured their sick. Now, when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, This is a desert place, and the hour is already late. Send the crowds away so they may go into the villages and buy themselves food. Jesus feeds 5,000. But Jesus said to them, They do not need to go away. You yourselves give them some food. They answered him, We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said to them, Bring them here to me. And when he had ordered the crowd to recline on the grass, he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds, and all ate and were satisfied, and they gathered up what was left over, 12 baskets full of fragments. Now the number of those who had eaten was 5,000 men, without counting women and children. Jesus walks on the water. And immediately afterwards he made his disciples get into the boat and cross the sea ahead of him, while he dismissed the crowd. When he had dismissed the crowd, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was late, he was there alone, but the boat was in the midst of the sea, buffeted by the waves, for the wind was against them. But in the 4th watch of the night he came to them, walking upon the sea. And they, seeing him walking upon the sea, were greatly alarmed, and exclaimed, It is a ghost, and they cried out for fear. Then Jesus immediately spoke to them, saying, Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid. Peter walks on the water. But Peter answered him and said, Lord, If it is thou, bid me to come to thee over the water. And he said, Come. Then Peter got out of the boat and walked in the water to come to Jesus. But seeing the wind was strong, he was afraid. And as he began to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And Jesus at once stretched forth his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, O thou of little faith, why didst thou doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind fell. But they who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, Truly, thou art the Son of God. Other miracles. In crossing over, they came to the land at Gennesaret. The inhabitants of that place, as soon as they recognized him, sent into that whole country and brought to him all the sick, and they entreated him to let them touch but the vessel of his cloak, and all who touched it were saved. Chapter 15. Christ refutes the scribes and Pharisees. Then scribes and Pharisees from Jerusalem came to him, saying, Why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of the ancients? For they do not wash their hands when they take food. But he answered and said to them, And why do you transgress the commandment of God because of your tradition? For God said, Honor thy father and thy mother, and let him who curses father or mother be put to death. But you say, Whoever shall say to his father or mother, Any support thou mightst have had for me is dedicated to God, does not have to honor his father or his mother. So you have made void the commandment of God by your tradition. Hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy of you, saying, This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me, and in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrine the precepts of men. Chapter 13, verse 4 references Exodus, chapter 20, verse 12, 21, verse 27, Leviticus, chapter 20, verse 9, Deuteronomy, chapter 5, verse 16, Proverbs, chapter 20, and if I have problems pronouncing this one, chapter 6, 12. Disciples warned to shun the Pharisees. Then he called the crowd to him and said to them, Hear and understand. What goes into the mouth does not defile a man, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles a man. Verse 11, Jesus enunciates a principle which will eventually free Christians not only from the rabbinical traditions, but from the law concerning clean and unclean food. The apostles themselves did not know until they received further revelation. They were freed from this law. Then his disciples came up and said to him, Dost thou know what the Pharisees have taken offense at hearing this saying? But he answered and said, Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be rooted up. Let them alone. They are blind guides of blind men. But if a blind man guide a blind man, will both fall into a pit. Christ explains what defiles a man. But Peter spoke to him, saying, Explain to us this parable. And he said, Are you also even yet not without understanding? Do you not realize that whatever enters the mouth passes into the belly and is cast out into the drain? But the things that proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and it is they that defile a man. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, immorality, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things that defile a man, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile a man. The Canaanite woman. And leaving there, Jesus retired to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman came out of that territory and cried out to him, saying, Have pity on me, O Lord, son of David. My daughter is sorely beset by a devil. He answered her not a word. And his disciples came up and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she is crying after us. But he answered and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. He said in answer, It is not fair to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. But she said, Yes, Lord, for even the dogs eat of the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, great is thy faith. Let it be done to thee as thou wilt. And her daughter was healed from that moment. Verse 21, the departure of our Lord for the region of Tyre and Sidon begins a period in his life in which he devotes himself chiefly to the instruction of the apostles. Jesus heals the suffering. And when Jesus had departed from there, he went along the Sea of Galilee, and he went up the mountain and sat there. And great crowds came to him, bringing with them the dumb, the blind, the lame, the maimed, and many others. And they set them down at his feet, and he cured them. So the crowds marveled to see the dumb speak, the lame walk, and the blind see. And they glorified the God of Israel. Jesus has compassion on the crowd. Then Jesus called together his disciples and said, I have compassion on the crowd, for they have now been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat, and I am unwilling to send them away fasting, lest they faint on the way. And the disciples said to him, But in a desert, where are we to get enough loaves to satisfy so great a crowd? And Jesus said to them, How many loaves have you? And they said, 7 and a few little fishes. Jesus feeds 4,000, and he bade the crowd recline on the ground. Then giving the 7 loaves and the fishes, he gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowd. They all ate and were satisfied. And they took up what was left of the fragments, 7 full baskets. Now those who had eaten were 4,000 men, apart from women and children. When he had dismissed the crowd, he got into the boat and came into the district of Magadan. Chapter 16. The Pharisees and Sadducees ask a sign. Sorry, I'm not great at pronouncing that one. And the Pharisees and Sadducees came to him to test him, and they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. But answering them, he said, When is it evening, you say, the weather will be fair, for the sky is red. In the morning, you say, it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and lowering. You know then how to read the face of the sky, but cannot read the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation demands a sign, and no sign shall be given it but the sign of Jonas. And he left them and went away. 11 of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And when his disciples crossed the sea, they found that they had forgotten to bring bread. And he said to them, Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. But they began to argue among themselves, saying, We have brought no bread. But Jesus, knowing this, said, You have little faith. Why do you argue amongst yourselves that you have no bread? Do you not yet understand nor remember the 5 loaves among 5,000 men, and how many baskets you took up? Nor the 7 loaves among 4,000, and how many large baskets you took up? Why do you not understand that it was not of bread I said to you, Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? And I'm sure that if I saw a different translation, I'd know how to pronounce that, so I apologize. Then they understood that he bade them beware not of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Peter's confession. Now Jesus, having come into the district of Caesarea Philippi, began to ask his disciples, saying, Who do men say the Son of Man is? But they said, Some say John the Baptist, and others Elias, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. He said to them, But who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Chapter 16, verse 16. From the declaration that Peter's knowledge of the nature of Jesus was revealed by the Father, we may be sure that he was not speaking of adoptive sonship when he called Jesus the Son of the living God. For him, the Messiahship is transcendent, the Messiah is divine. Then Jesus answered and said, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to thee, but my Father in heaven. Bar-Jonah, son of Jonah. Jonah is most likely an abridged form of Johanan. John. Peter, in Greek Petros, is a masculine form of Petra. Rock. In Aramaic, the name meaning rock is Kepha. In Greek, it took on the form Kephas. And I say to thee, Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Verse 18. In the Gospels, the word church is used only here in chapter 18, 17. In the Old Testament, it designated the assembly of Israel. Here isn't speaking of his church. Our Lord means a society of men, united to serve God as he had taught them to do. Compared with an edifice, it is said to rest on a rock, as did the house of the wise men of 724. The rock was Peter. Of course, the strength of the foundation comes from Christ. The gates of hell, hostile evil powers, their aggressive force will struggle in vain against the church. She shall never be overcome. She is indefectible, and since she has the office of teacher, and since she would be overcome if error prevailed, she is infallible. Verse 19. Keys. A symbol of authority. Peter has the power to admit into the church and to exclude therefrom. Nor is he merely the porter, he has complete power within the church. To bind and loose seems to have been used by the Jews in the sense of to forbid or permit, but chapter 18:18, as well as the present context, requires a more comprehensive meaning. In heaven, God ratifies the decisions which Peter makes on earth in the name of Christ. Passion and resurrection foretold. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem. Oh, there was one more. I apologize. Then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was Jesus Christ. Jesus still maintains the secret of his real character on account of the prevalent views concerning the Messiah and his kingdom. There was great danger that the people would think that his purpose was to set up an earthly reign. Passion and resurrection foretold. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and scribes and chief priests and be put to death, and on the third day rise again. And Peter, taking him aside, began to chide him, saying, Far be it from thee, O Lord, this will never happen to thee. He turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. Thou art a scandal to me, for thou dost not mind the things of God, but those of men, the doctrine of the cross. Then Jesus said to his disciples, If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For he who would save his life will lose it, but he who loses his life for my sake will find it. For what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world, but suffer the loss of his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, then he will render to everyone according to his conduct. Amen, amen, I say to you, there are some of those standing here who will not taste death, till they have seen the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Verse 18, this saying should not be regarded as closely connected with the preceding saying about the Lord's coming in glory. It is introduced in Mark chapter 8, verse 39, by the formula. And he said to them, Here there is question not of Jesus coming in glory, but of another coming which establishes his kingdom on earth, probably that of Pentecost. And that was chapters 13 through 16. Join me tomorrow for chapters 17, 18, and 19. Until then, thank you very much for watching. 17, 18, 19, and 20. Pardon me. Until then, thank you very much for watching. You make sure that you all have a wonderful day, and God bless.